So we're here today to talk a little bit about our GPU portfolio. And just to get this out of the way, if anyone's interested in the kind of compute-oriented GPUs or the AI-oriented GPUs, we're not going to be talking about those today. This is pure remote viz and desktop. So if you want to chat about those, feel free to come find me after the session and we can get into a little bit of detail there. So this is about using GPUs to power remote graphics and visualization scenarios. My name's Ian Finder. I'm a senior program manager on the Azure Accelerated VM teams, the teams responsible for bringing you GPU VMs, FPGA VMs. My colleague, Vijay Kanchanahali, actually runs our remote viz program. He couldn't be here today to talk to you fine people. So I will put his contact information up afterward, and you can direct, of course, to me, as well as to him, your virtual desktop and remote viz related questions. So we're going to go over a few things about why you might want to use Azure for VDI over other cloud providers. And then we're going to walk through our Azure GPU and HPC offerings, kind of show you where our VDI products fit in the Azure VM family. We'll show a customer case study video that's super cool. And then we'll talk about a really exciting announcement that we have that I think is really going to help the economics of virtual GPU accelerated desktops in the cloud. Help you, help your customers get on the next generation of VDI solution. So first of all, Microsoft has a massive data center global network. And this really, really matters for VDI more than a lot of use cases because you're latency sensitive and you're sensitive to the locality of the data. In order to really replace a workstation, you have to be near your customer's edge. Even though we might not have GPUs in all 54 Azure regions, you're always coming into the closest Azure edge. Then it travels across our Azure infrastructure to the nearest region with your GPUs in it. It's a massive advantage of having to take the long route of taking the WAN all the way to the data center where the GPUs are. So for virtual desktop scenarios, specifically follow the sun deskless worker scenarios like are popular in media and entertainment business, it's really, really advantageous to have this global edge advantage where you're always routed to the nearest GPU infrastructure. We're also built for high availability. Moving desktop workstations to the cloud means you can't afford to have any downtime. We have our GPU visualization SKUs available with availability zones, as well as the standard Azure high availability features to make sure that your users can always access their workstations. This is really important to us. So interestingly enough, although this is more of a workstation scenario and a remote visualization interactive scenario, this is still part of our specialized SKU portfolio. These are VMs that are a little different from your standard VMs that you might use to host a website or a SQL database. We have a broad platform of products in this family. Over here is the general purpose stuff that you're probably familiar with, and the compute optimized, memory optimized kind of stuff you'll use in a database or services land. But then we move over into the specialized domain. And you can see here on the left our NC series of GPUs. These are our accelerated compute GPUs for AI, for genomics, for computational fluid dynamics. They're available with anything from a Kepler 80 all the way up to 8-way V100 system. Not really a visualization type of offering, more of a HPC, AI, ML offering. We have the ND series. Those double down on the deep learning kind of products. So multi-GPUs in a box, NVLink for deep learning scenarios. And then you see this NV family. This is what we're here to kind of talk about today. That starts with our first NV offering on the M60 all the way to what we're talking about today, which is NVv4. It's not built on an M60. It's really exciting. We also have our H series. This is our high-performance computing line backed by an InfiniBand backend network for scale-out scenarios. And then over on the right, we're in dedicated land for things like Cray and NetApp. So that's kind of where this fits into the product line. Talked a little about this. All of these specialized compute offerings are, in essence, VMs. They're not bare metal. They're not anything strange or out of the ordinary. That means they get access to normal Azure features like premium storage. Even though this is a GPU accelerated machine, it is a VM still. We pass the GPU device through. It's virtualized It's afforded all of the manageability aspects of a normal virtual machine. Another interesting thing we announced recently is actually an FPGA offering in the N series family as well. We're not going to talk about that today, but we have FPGA compute accelerators in Azure. So why do people use GPU computing? Well, over here on the left is, again, what we're talking about today. It's visualization and gaming, CAD users. But we're also going to talk about a new use case in the GPU accelerated desktop space, which is the light use case. People don't think about this, but every device in your bag has an embedded GPU in it, right? It's accelerating your web browsing experience, your light office experience. When you're using a virtual desktop session on a server, you don't even have a little integrated Intel GPU to fall back on, right? You're running on the server's host CPU. So we think that there's a new wave of light office users coming into the virtual desktop space as well, which I'll talk about a little bit. We think they can also be afforded an advantage by having a GPU at a good price point. Finally, there's kind of your high-end space. We talked a little about NC and ND offerings. This is rendering, HPC simulation, deep learning, and AI. The reason I have all these on one slide together is one of the key advantages of having a virtual desktop experience in the cloud is these resources on the right are large. They're unwieldy. They're generally expensive on-prem. In the cloud, they're just a VM. And by having a workstation in the cloud, you can have your artists working on the visualization side. You can have your business people doing reports that query into a deep learning-based infrastructure. And all this infrastructure is fundamentally, from your perspective, in the same place. This is the everything in the cloud advantage, where your data never leaves, whether it's at the high-end deep learning AI kind of scenarios or the light office scenarios. It's all in one place. So we've been doing this for a while. We have, on the left, our first set of offerings. And we have, again, two tracks, the VDI track, the desktop track, and the AI and the high-performance compute track. We started these all the way back in December 2016, when GPUs were fairly new to the cloud. So we started with the M60. That's a Maxwell generation NVIDIA GPU, and the K80 on the compute side, the Kepler. We continue to ship the M60 today because it's been a very popular seller. Even though it's an older GPU, that allows us to offer it at a lower price point. One piece of feedback we actually had on the NVv4 series of VM is that, hey, I want the M60. That's enough GPU for me. But you have to update the memory and the storage that goes along with it. I need more computer behind it. And in the interest of building the right sizes for our customers, we introduced the NVv4 series. Same old Maxwell GPU, which back in 2016 was a very high-end GPU, and it's still a good mid-range GPU. So we've updated that with premium storage, with more memory, with a newer CPU. But what's really cool is this new AMD Radeon Instinct MI25 offering that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and that you guys will be able to preview in the middle of this month. And I'll get to that, but there's some really interesting stuff there behind just the fact that it's an AMD part. There's some other really cool magic there. I don't need to go through the compute roadmap here on HPC and AI, except to say that we have one announcement coming soon, our NVv2, which is our flagship deep learning machine. We're updating that with InfiniBand and with 32 gig GPUs this month for cluster out ML scenarios. If you're interested in that, come talk to me afterward. So again, we've got the NVv3 here, and that has that M60 part we talked about. That's still a fairly mid-range GPU. It's still an expensive thing to dedicate a 300-watt TDP GPU card to a light office worker, right? This is squarely positioned at the high-end and cloud workstation power user space, but isn't something you'd really want to use to accelerate your rendering of an Excel spreadsheet. It's just not, it's overkill. We certainly have people who are doing that because that was the most cost-effective offering we had for some time. But today we're going to talk about NVv4. And this is really cool because single card, single server, can partition down to 1/8 of a GPU per VM. And this is transparent to you. I want to reiterate this. There have been a lot of virtual GPU solutions over the years that have required you to set up Windows Server terminal services, and then you can have 8 users connect to one VM, and they can each have 1/8 of a GPU. This is not that. This is independent of your VM and your infrastructure under it. You get a VM, and your VM gets 1/8 of a GPU, and that's just how it works. You could have a neighbor using securely another eighth of that GPU or a fourth of that GPU and never meet them in a multi-tenant cloud. So this really dynamically changes the economics of offering GPU-accelerated virtual desktops to users. And not only now, at the high end, can you take a whole MI25 card to yourself, but you can go all the way down to that 1/8. And we talked a little bit about why that's cool. You have people running Photoshop. You have people running Outlook. You have people running web browsers. Those all take advantage of GPUs for responsiveness, but it's not cost-effective, even with a 3-year-old GPU like the M60, to give each one of these people a full 300-watt TDP GPU card, or even a 75-watt TDP GPU card. It's not economical. So by having these new Radeon Instinct parts with fractional GPU sizes, we think we're finally getting to the point where we can start mainstreaming VDI for the light office worker and the knowledge worker who needs a responsive GPU-accelerated environment, but not a whole GPU. So to light this up, we have an ecosystem, a great ecosystem of partners that we work with. Obviously, you can use just RDP to these like normal VM. But from the manageability side, to help you get this in the hands of your users or your end customers if you're an ISV, we have Teradici. Teradici is a really cool company. They work on a remote desktop client that's optimized for like artists and media and entertainment. Has really nice color accuracy. It's good for that kind of workload, as well as just normal office stuff. There's Citrix for an extra level of kind of manageability for large enterprises. We have HP, we have Workspot. I don't know if anyone here has used Workspot, but they're really neat. You can just get a GPU-accelerated VM in a browser. So we have all these great partners that we work with so that you don't have to just spin up a bunch of VMs and hand out a bunch of RDP credentials and stuff like that. We have actual manageability through our great partner ecosystem to help you get these virtual desktops in the hands of your users, whether they're logging in from an iPad or a Surface, whatever, web browser, doesn't matter. We've also got a first-party solution. There's trade-offs between all of these. This is Windows Virtual Desktop. Many of those solution partners offer the value prop of simplified management, great security. Go compare them all. They're all great in their own ways. And there'll be a clear one for your use case. So we talked a little bit about NVv4. This is our updated M60 platform. This is really good for oil and gas kind of customers who can afford that mid-range GPU, but also want a bunch of memory to back it up. And basically, this system is the same M60 GPU, but with much beefier host machine behind it. Talked a bit about this. One interesting thing as well is that we include the NVIDIA grid license on this platform. So some of you in the audience may have deployed the NVIDIA GPUs on-prem. You're aware that you need a grid license to be able to use visualization on them. We actually bundle that into the instance cost per hour. So it's something not only you don't have to manage, but you don't have to figure out the economics of. We have premium storage on this. We've doubled the memory up to almost half a terabyte. Again, this is really, really good for ArcGIS, for seismic customers, customers with large data sets to actually work on visualization. You can get these with up to 4 M60s as well per VM if you need multiple visualization GPUs. This is kind of a rare use case, but it does happen. Yeah? Yeah, you could. No, why would there be? This is 4 GPUs with 448 gigs of RAM. There's not 1 terabyte on the host machine here. That's the full host. If you're talking about the BIOS versus UEFI MMIO clip, that's definitely something that we can talk about. It doesn't affect this SKU, doesn't affect any of our SKUs because we're just moving to Gen 2 VMs where that's relevant, which are UEFI boot VMs. That's very much an edge case. So this is one of the solution partners that we want to talk about, actually an end customer that's worked with Workspot, one of our solution partners, to build a virtual desktop infrastructure for their user base that allows their formerly desk-bound set of engineering staff to be highly mobile. And what they do is they're an engineering firm. And they use drones to do site surveys and build out construction plans. Let's hear a little bit about their use case.
Duda was founded here in Southern California in 1980. We're an environmental services firm. We have a broad range of services, 20 different practices. We now have over 600 employees in 15 offices across the West Coast and in Hawaii. And we've just been experiencing accelerated growth these last few years.
So at Duda, our goal as a firm really is to work smarter and not harder. It's one thing to fly the drones and to actually acquire the information. It's a whole nother ballgame when it comes to processing that. That's where Workspot has really allowed us to innovate and really become a leader in the industry, because processes that would take us in the beginning using our homegrown solutions would take us several days. Once we implemented the solution, it was several hours.
Prior to Workspot on Azure, we were winning work faster than we could process the job, so we actually had to throttle back. We literally had high-end engineers waiting for jobs to finish before they could start the next job. The Duda management team, they had seen that IT was what was causing them to not be able to go out and win this work. They were looking to IT for a solution. So with Workspot, now we're able to process jobs in parallel. We're able to take that 3, 4, 5 days down to multiple jobs being done in one day.
We were able to actually think differently and say, well, if we can do it that fast, we can explore different solutions for our clients, because we don't have those limitations in terms of technology.
The technology has shifted from being the bottleneck to being the enabler, and in fact is now our competitive advantage.
What we initially estimated as our savings was about $80,000 per year. We've come to realize those savings, not only in terms of operational fixed costs, software, hardware, but also when you look at the efficiency of our staff.
Our head of our GIS, he's just seeing his team be much more effective, much more productive.
And as a business manager, it's fantastic. Someone that was sitting at a machine crunching data for multiple hours, in some cases multiple days, is now crunching multiple instances at the same time. That's going much faster and allowing us to pass those savings along to our clients.
With the workstations running on Workspot and Azure, we have a lot more flexibility with the devices we're handing out to our end users. We used to have to spec out these high-end mobile workstations. Now we're able to go with a more cost-effective device, a solid piece of hardware, something like the Surface Go.
By providing the tools for our employees to work remotely, someone can be sitting at their kitchen. You can open up a machine and have the computing power and have the ability to function as if you were sitting next to the most powerful machine in the company. And for us, that's a huge advantage, because we can hire folks that live in a location where we may not have an office. They're the best employee for that job, but we can provide them with the tools to allow us to function and serve our clients effectively. Then all of a sudden we've unlocked a new market of talent.
So with the shift from running an on-premise data center to more cloud-based services, the IT staff has a shift in mindset as well. So it has moved from more solving technical problems with servers and storage, and now it's more focusing on what are the needs of our end users and our clients. So now we're able to have discussions about what are your pain points and how can we make you more effective, more efficient.
We've been able to grow our business by 300% and still accommodate that growth with the existing staff. What's allowing that to occur is the fact that we can run these processes in parallel, which really provides us with a super strength, so to speak, to serve our clients' needs.
So I really like the story that this tells. It hits on a lot of key pieces for VDI, which is being able to have your workforce out in the field wherever they can best serve their needs, but have your infrastructure in one virtual place. This does address kind of more of that mid-market and high-end use case. You heard them talk about how they were speccing out very high-end machines. We think that as bring your own device takes off even further, but people want to keep their business tools and their data in one spot, we're going to have a lot more of this at the lower end of the GPU market as well. That's what we're hoping NVv4 will help our customers do. So this is what we've been talking about in terms of an announcement. This is the full specs of the NVv4 virtual machines. That previous slide was the M60. Again, full GPUs. This is fractional GPUs. We're also doing hyper-threading on our new SKUs on both NVv3 and NVv4. This was in response to customer demand. A lot of users find that a hyper-threaded environment is more responsive for multi-threaded CAD tools. So this is us listening to the customer feedback that we got there. And going forward, our VDI sizes we expect to consistently support hyper-threading. So that's just a minor new detail versus last year. This enters preview in the middle of this month, and I will be providing everyone in this audience a list, preview link on how to sign up. I think this is really, really exciting. I keep underscoring that, but this is the first instance that I know of in the cloud of actual GPU partitioning that is totally transparent to the virtual machine and the end user, and I think that's really cool. So at launch, yeah. So I would expect something good, especially for the fractional sizes, perhaps not GPU to GPU, but the fact that we can support the fractional sizes is all about cost. That said, I am legally not allowed, probably by the same people who stuck the ridiculous clip of the iPhone in that video where they're doing the VDI from the iPhone, probably same people, but I can't tell you any prices until their final GA prices. But certainly that is the driving reason behind this whole thing, is to change the economics. So in the beginning, we're only going to support Windows-based operating systems. This is a driver-based limitation. So if you come in at that preview time frame on the 18th of this month and you really can't wait to get your hands on it, you are going to have to run Windows for the time being. In the first half of calendar year 2020, we're going to roll out all the Xorg Linux stuff that you need to do Linux VDI as well. And right off the bat, this supports Windows RDP. It supports Teradici, many of our great solution partners in this space. This is just DirectX OpenGL under the hood. If you have a particular screen sharing application or virtual desktop server application of choice, it should just work on the operating systems in play. Let's take a look at this thing. I've got one right here. This is in a lab in Redmond, but it's running the full Azure virtual machine solution. This is actually GPU partitioning live. I am having a little bit of difficulty with the conference network, and I'm sure many others in the audience have had the same experience. But let's see how we do. So this is the Teradici client. I'm going to type in my password. And this is going to be running on a quarter of a GPU. So this is 1/4 of an Instinct MI25 card when this comes up. I think someone from Teradici is in the audience looking at this, so yeah. I've also got 1/8 of a GPU up here. The networking is really bad here, admittedly, but this is on 1/8 of a Radeon Instinct MI25. This is running WebGL. The frame rate's not super great. I guarantee you that's conference network. I was running these at my house in Seattle. They were fine. And you can see that it's fairly visualization heavy task doing WebGL, so we're at about 87% of 1/8. Again, this is a light office kind of centric size. When you go up to a quarter or a half, you can start running AutoCAD, SolidWorks, things like that. I will bring up the 1/4 size over RDP now. Always have a backup. And I'm just going to switch back while that loads. So this is live today. This is the first that I've ever seen, at least, GPU partition scenario where we have those two VMs I'm showing. Those are on the same system, sharing the same GPU, totally transparent to the operating system. And I did have this logged in the background, but we're going to have to wait a second. Sorry. Totally. You get that? Awesome. I'm going to switch it back in 1 second here. So I'm running AutoCAD here. I have a standard AutoCAD benchmark, and I'll just run this through the paces as well. So this is the quarter size, and believe it or not, the quarter size is actually fairly sufficient for light CAD work, even shaded CAD work. We've been getting good results. This is going to do some 3D wireframe. Takes a second. So 1/4 of a single GPU. The lag and that you're seeing is due to the convention network, but this is just over a standard RDP session. When you work with a client like Teradici that's optimized for scenarios like CAD, like M&E, you get a lot better results as well. So that's why we have that broad set of solution partners, but it's totally usable over RDP from a data center on a competition or on a convention network. Excuse me. Yes. Yeah, that's Windows 10. Nothing special. Just Windows 10 on Azure VM with a 1/4 of a GPU. All right, so that's the demo. Anyone interested? I hope this is something of interest to all of you. I think it's really cool. NVv4 sign up, aka AMS NVv4 sign up. Set expectations. People will start getting responses around the 18th to get into the program. Standard kind of preview program, SLA and expectations around there. Please provide feedback early and often. We'll have more word about GA in the first half of next year. For the preview? No, it's just, we're very, yeah, it's pay-go. Standard pay-go model. That's actually a great question. These will be available with all the usual kind of reserved instance and stuff like that. Talk to your business planning contacts and figure out the price points when it goes GA, of course. But there's no special reservation model or anything for this. It's actually, we think it's really helps us capitalize on the fungibility of all these resources we have by having this partitioning. So pay-go is actually integral to the business model of this. So any questions? And you can also ask about compute GPUs if you wish. I have an appendix slide I'll show in a moment that we can actually. They took my appendix out. We'll generally start, when we deploy any specialized SKU, we start with 4 of the hero regions. I'd have to double check. I'm subbing in for my colleague VJ, who actually owns this SKU, so I don't admittedly know off the top of my head, but it's usually East US, West US, Southeast Asia, and Europe in some combination of that. And then because it's a VDI SKU, I think they're probably going a little wider because that's what we do for compute. Anything else?
What would be sizing guidelines for users that have, say, like multiple monitors, large size monitors, 4K, that sort of thing?
So with any of these VDI SKUs, what we kind of advise our users to do is, first of all, try the different PCO IP apps because they're not all created equal in terms of what they support for those kinds of configurations. They all have different feature sets there. But really, there's no substitute for signing up for the preview and benchmarking it. If you have like 2 4K displays, I'd say that you're probably going to want at least like a half of an MI25. But some workloads are going to be more demanding than others, and there's no good replacement for just benchmarking it, which we hope is as easy as possible to do with the pay-as-you-go models and the fact that you can just take your VHD and move it over to the next SKU. Just change it from the drop-down menu, reinstall the drivers, and you're good. And that's personally what I do when I'm evaluating these as well. I build a VHD, set it up, change the drivers, change the SKU in the portal, redeploy. Yep. And we will be doing a blog post about this shortly, if it's not live already. You'll be able to see all this online. Just Bing search Azure NVv4, and you'll find it. It'll be on the Azure Tech blogs, similar. Any other questions about just GPUs in general? No. Yeah, we wanted to get away from, you need to get the AMD drivers, but to date, those are freely distributed, right, to you and by AMD. There's no grid driver uplift that's, you know, associated with this GPU model in general. I believe so, yes. If they haven't been, then they will be in very short order. It's in the planning. Yeah, when you go to the website to sign up, and when you look at the blogs, there's a walkthrough that will be associated with the sign up. At the very least, if you do the preview sign up, you will get a welcome packet email that'll walk you through, you know, when you get quota on your subscription. The way the preview works is you fill out a little form, say why you want it. You know, don't put "I'm mining bitcoins" in the form, and then they'll reply, you know, what's your subscription, or you'll fill that in the form. You'll get quota, and a little welcome packet will come in your email that'll walk you through how to set up the VM. It'll have links to the drivers and all the other resources. We'll have to follow up on email about that. My email, by the way, is iafinder@microsoft.com. If you have any questions on this, I should have put it in the deck, but email me and I can route you to the appropriate people for the question or answer myself. So we're always reachable as the product team. We love to hear your feedback. We also have an alias, Azure GPU Feedback, that you should all know about. That's the entire GPU product group that looks at that. We triage it. So Azure GPU Feedback in general, that's your hotline to the product team. Our developers read it, I read it, colleagues read it. So that's anything Viz, anything GPU in Azure, anything compute. It's the hotline.
Since you're avoiding the grid licensing, I'm guessing there's no plans to go GPU partitioning on NVIDIA?
So first of all, we're not avoiding any grid licensing. That's just a reality of the NVIDIA parts, which have their advantages. The M60 is a great GPU, and you know, we roll the grid license into our instance cost as part of a feature to our customers. So that actually gives us something good out of that. But that's just not how AMD is selling these right now. As to partitioning on NVIDIA, no, we're a multi-vendor cloud ecosystem. We've shown this time and time again. We have Intel parts, we have AMD parts. Some of you may have seen on the H series our Rome announcement. We will continue to be multi-vendor and take whatever features we can get when they're available from the vendor. For compute? Well, so this is for VDI. Okay, the AMD GPU ecosystem, the general purpose, I think you're talking about like GPU. You could do that, certainly. Yeah, you could do that. You could fit multiple users through a solution like that in half a partition. It's totally transparent to the host OS, so it'll support it. I don't know whether your performance will be good if you're taking like half a GPU and running 8 users on it, but you're free to try it out and absolutely let us know. And I think for web chart applications and stuff, that might be okay if you're not hitting it with more than 4 or 5 users at once. Anything else? All right, I hope you all have a great Ignite session. Feel free to reach out if you need anything. We're, GPU product group's always here for you, and I hope to see some of you coming in and trying this out. Thanks, everyone.